Back to the Future is an incredibly precise piece of work. In it, every detail matters, every dialogue and every event leads to something or depends on something. This film could be studied in school as an illustration of cause and effect relationships, showing how much a person's future depends on their choices. We see the events of 1985, and then we learn what led to them. We observe the events of the past, and later we see the result of those events in the future. We see Principal Strickland telling Marty that his father was a slacker, and then we find out that his father really was like that. Biff bullies George in 1985, and later we discover how it all started in 1955. Lorraine tells Marty that at his age she wasn't like him, but then it turns out she was even worse. The Twin Pines Mall turns into the Lone Pine Mall. The ledge that Doc broke in 1955 remains broken in 1985 and in 2015. The mayor of the town in 1985 is Goldie Wilson, while in 1955 we see him as an enthusiastic young man. The local bum Red turns out to be the former mayor of Hill Valley. The script was mostly written for all three films at once, and that's why we see such a strong intertwining of the story. Gale and Zemeckis did a colossal job. The story is completely airtight. There isn't a single unnecessary detail. Every dialogue and every interaction of the characters leads somewhere. There is a setup.
Joey didn't make parole again.
And there is a payoff.
So you're my Uncle Joey. Better get used to these bars, kid.
But there are also moments that at first glance seem to serve neither as setup nor payoff. If you pay close attention to them, you'll discover they have a huge impact on the plot. Throughout the story, Doc convinces Marty and us, the viewers, that the space-time continuum is extremely fragile, and even the smallest change can lead to catastrophic consequences. He says that the life of one person means nothing on the scale of the universe, and in order to preserve its balance, no one must ever know their own future. So Marty wants to tell Doc that he will be shot in the parking lot of the mall, but Doc refuses to listen, not wanting to tear apart the fabric of reality and destroy the universe. However, a few minutes later, we learn that Doc taped Marty's letter back together, read it, and survived. At first glance, it may seem that Doc acted against his principles and decided to save his life at the risk of the universe. But that's not the case. Doc found proof that the future can be changed without creating a catastrophe. The event that saved his life is in this scene. Marty tells Doc that his father knocked out Biff with a single punch, something he had never done before. Doc suddenly asks,
Ever? No, why? What's the matter? All right!
At that moment, Doc realizes the universe is not static, as he had thought. It's flexible. When he saw the restored photograph of Marty, his brother, and sister, he understood that the past can be changed without destroying the space-time continuum. You can see the realization dawn on Doc's face. George's punch saved Doc's life, because after that, Doc pieced the letter back together, learned about the coming danger, and put on a bulletproof vest in time. It was this punch, absent in the previous timeline, that made Doc rethink everything. But what made George punch Biff? A desire to protect the girl? In fact, not only that. In the first film, we see George drinking punch at the dance. In America, there's a tradition. At school dances, they serve non-alcoholic punch, but there's always the risk that someone will spike it with alcohol. In the middle of part 2, in the scene where Marty tries to take the almanac from Biff, we can see one of Biff's goons pouring liquor into the punch bowl. That's the same punch George drank in the first film. He got so relaxed that he even lost track of time. Because of this, he was late, and Biff ended up in the car instead of Marty.
Hey, you! Get your damn hands off!
Oh, I think you got the wrong car, McFly.
The skinny nerd George had most likely never drunk before, and so with a sudden rush of courage, he did what he had always wanted. However, despite George's heroic act, Marty continues to disappear. The photograph attached to his guitar nearly vanishes completely. As Doc says in Part 3, the photograph shows the future as it flows from the present. Only someone who already knows what will happen can change it. That means only external interference can alter the future. So what kind of external interference allowed Marty to survive? After all, he was just playing the guitar and Doc was busy with the wiring in the square. Who else but the two of them knew what was happening? The answer is simple. George. When the red-headed guy pushed him away, George went to the stage, closer to his only friend, Marty. And what did he see? His friend started to disappear. His hand became transparent. Being a big fan of science fiction and slightly drunk, George instantly understood what was happening. Marty calls him Dad 3 times during the film.
Hey, Dad! George! Hey, you in the fight! Dad!
Fight my entire life.
Look, you're not gonna be picking a fight, Dad. Daddy-o.
Marty's transparent hand became the push that allowed George to piece the puzzle together. He realized that Marty was his son and Lorraine his future wife. For a guy who believed in Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, this was not strange at all. That's why he pushed the redhead away and kissed Lorraine, which saved Marty. If events had gone naturally, George wouldn't have kissed Lorraine, and Marty's photograph would have disappeared completely. He had drunk the punch, knocked out Biff, but he still wasn't confident enough. Marty's disappearing hand became that external interference that changed the photograph. That's why later, George writes a book called A Match Made in Space, with Marty on the cover in his radiation suit, the very image that brought the boy and the girl together. And here we move smoothly to another question. Isn't this too many coincidences and lucky chances? With time travel, it can't be otherwise. Going into the past, a person cannot do something that would prevent their own birth, just as they cannot do something that would prevent the invention of the time machine. So why does the DeLorean keep stalling, even though it was worked on by one of the greatest geniuses of our time? First, we need to ask, what would have happened if the car hadn't stalled? If it hadn't stalled at the moment of return, Marty would have started a few seconds earlier and missed the lightning strike. He would have been stuck in 1955 and created a bunch of paradoxes. If it hadn't stalled when Marty first arrived in 1955, he wouldn't have hidden it behind the billboard, but gone into town. A DeLorean driving around the streets of 1955 would have caused even more paradoxes. If it hadn't stalled at the end of the film, Marty would have arrived earlier, before the Libyans attacked Doc, and therefore he wouldn't have gone back in time. That would have caused a paradox. Most likely the cause is the flux capacitor invented by Doc. It is what makes the engine fail to start until the right moment comes. Only this way can a stable time loop be created. The flux capacitor is a kind of protection against paradoxes. It doesn't let the driver harm himself. In those cases where the car wouldn't have stalled, paradoxes would arise, and eventually that would lead to the time machine not being invented, meaning Marty wouldn't go to the past. Therefore, such events cannot exist. Thus, only stable time frames remain. It's similar to time travel in Doctor Who. As the Doctor says, there are moments that can be changed, and there are fixed points, integral parts of reality itself. And there's still one more question about the time machine and the flux capacitor. Why is it always drawn to November 1955? Because that date is a massive center of temporal energy. At that time, in one town, there were 4 time machines at once. The one Marty first arrived in, the one old Biff used to go back, the one Marty came back in the second time to fix the consequences of old Biff's actions, and the one Doc had hidden in the mine in 1885. Moreover, the flux capacitor was struck by lightning twice in one night. Time here looks like a knot, pulling in time travelers. Thanks to the time machine, 2 enthusiasts, and a little bit of alcohol, everyone got a better life, except for Biff at first glance. But if you look closer, on his car in the new reality, we see the logo Biff's Auto Detailing. He became a simple and even good-natured man, owning his own car restoration business. Many would prefer such work to sitting in an office, which Biff did before. At the beginning of the story, we see George doing all of Biff's work since school. Biff wasn't able to perform his duties and knew it very well. In fact, he lived in fear that one day George would quit, leaving him without work and without even basic skills. In 1955, during the chase after Marty, Biff crashes into a manure truck. He had to pay $300 for repairs, a huge sum for him. He never expected it to be so expensive. So, when he crashed into the manure truck again during the second chase, he simply had no money left for repairs. And repairing the car himself, he discovered a love for it. That's how Biff changed a job he wasn't capable of doing, and which filled him with fear for his own small business, in which he turned out to be good. And that logo in the film was not added by accident. It's a kind of Easter egg. When Marty changes the timeline from the one where Biff was a millionaire to the normal one, the text on the matchbook also changes, from pleasure paradise to auto detailing, emphasizing the fact that Biff became the owner of an auto shop. This also answers why Biff turned from a school bully into a normal person. In the first film, it seems that he changed after George's punch. However, in the second film, we see that even after the punch, he remained a vicious thug and tried to run Marty down with his Ford. The reason for the change lies in the car. After cleaning it of manure for the second time, he realized he liked working with machines. He started his own business and, thanks to it, learned how to deal with customers. Work turned the bully into a kind-hearted man collecting stickers. One might assume that being a millionaire and owning a corporation is better than running an auto shop. But old Biff still tried to change his life. When he returned from the past after rewriting history, he collapsed to the ground in terrible pain. This looks very much like what happened to Marty when George refused to kiss Lorraine. The reason is that in the alternate reality, millionaire Biff simply wouldn't have lived to old age. Either he would have ruined his health earlier or been killed. His successful cosplay of Donald Trump ended tragically. But he didn't disappear instantly because the world eventually shifted to the timeline where he lived until 77. That's why he writhed in pain, like Marty, but ultimately didn't die. And so it turned out. Thanks to alcohol, George punched Biff. Thanks to that punch, Doc survived. Thanks to Doc, Clara didn't fall into the ravine, and young McFly didn't end up in jail. Can we conclude that one bottle of alcohol saved several lives and changed the fates of others? It's impossible to say for sure. Fates are changed by people and their actions, and chance. From time to time, the universe gives us a second chance.